to the Meeple Podcast. I'm Bill Price.
And I'm Hollis Biggs.
And here we go. This will be episode 15. If you're still with us, we appreciate it. And thanks for coming along with this ride. So today, we actually have two games that share a lot of DNA as far as the mechanisms that they use, but are two very, very different feeling games. And we kind of wanted to walk through not only like presenting the games and what we like and dislike about them, kind of like we normally do, but we also wanted to talk a little more in depth about the shared mechanisms that they use and sort of how they do it differently and sort of why they do it, and maybe mention some other games if you like those kind of things that you could look at, potentially a few that we've already reviewed.
Definitely. Do you want to lead us off by talking about Canvas?
I do. So Canvas is a 1 to 5 player game. Takes about 30 minutes. It says, I think it's probably closer to 45. But we did play with 5 players, so that could be why it took us a little bit longer. But Canvas is a very accessible game. It's light and very family friendly. And it's basically about painting masterpiece oil paintings. And the way they do this is actually really clever. It's they have these see-through plastic clear cards that have little pieces of artwork on them, and you slide them into these sleeves with kind of backgrounds. And as you overlay them, and you overlay 3 of them together, and you end up with these very unique paintings that will just sort of be, they kind of draw from some ideas from existing paintings, and there's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of combinations, if not more than that, combinations you could do with different backgrounds, and some of them are like a background element. Some of them might be a foreground element, like a girl with an umbrella, and there might be a dragon in the background, and there could be like a frame of birds or something that is really, really neat. And each of these cards have they call painting elements, which are kind of like sort of themes that they have. And for game purposes, what you're doing here is you're trying to build paintings that score points, ultimately. And the way to do this is through a method that we've talked about before, open drafting. So if you remember, open drafting is when players select something, either a card or a resource or a tile or a die or something that everyone can see and everyone can also select from. So kind of an open marketplace sort of drafting. And in this case, it's cards. It's these clear cards. And you can select a card from what is available on the market. And I think there's 5 or 6 cards available at any given time. And if you want the first card, then you can just take it for free. If you want the second card, you have to drop off these what they're called inspiration tokens, which look like
little palettes.
Little palettes, yeah, like you paint from. And so you drop one off at every preceding card up to the one you want. So if I wanted the 4th one, I would drop an inspiration token on the first one, the second one, and the third one, and then I would take the 4th card. Now, the next person who takes one of the other ones is free to, they actually get that inspiration token back with them in addition to the card. So that's kind of how sort of the currency of buying these cards. And sometimes you're like, man, I don't have enough to get that thing I really want. But the fun thing is that as people take ones before that, the cards at the very end, the most expensive cards, they slide down. So they'll get cheaper and cheaper. And hopefully, if there's a card you really, really want and nobody else really, really wants it, then maybe it'll be there for you and it'll be even cheaper for you on the next turn. So ultimately what you're doing is you're taking those into your hand and you are putting them together. You have a maximum of 5 cards you can have. Once you have 5 cards in your hand, you have to combine 3 of them into a painting. And then you score that painting based on these judges' criteria. And that's going to change in every game. There's cards up at the top that'll be like, you get a red ribbon if you have one of each of these symbols that are on the bottom of the painting. You might get a green ribbon if you have X number of colors, or if maybe if you don't have any of this one particular symbol or something. There's a whole bunch of different ones, and they'll be different in every game because you kind of mix them and match them. So you're always going to be scoring based on different criteria, and that kind of keeps it from being the exact same game over and over and over again. But inherently, that's all it is. You're just you're drafting cards, you're putting them in paintings, and you're scoring them. And at the end, the number of ribbons you have, you're collecting these sets of these ribbons. And the number of each ribbon determines how many victory points you get, and whoever has most victory points is the winner. Does that sound about right?
I think that was a great description. I think that, the strategy in this game, if you want to call it a strategy, I suppose, is like collecting a specific type of ribbon, or whoever has the most variety of ribbons, kind of depending on what you've been searching for, is critical. So I think my strategy for it, I can't remember exactly the card we were playing with or what we were doing, but like having 2 matching symbols in, a certain colorway, or having each of a different type of symbol. So the symbols are things like a triangle, a sun, a multicolored palette almost, some strike throughs. Those elements are collectible in a lot of these cards that will earn you ribbons, or points rather. And those ribbons act like multipliers the more you have.
Yes, and there's an odd gray ribbon that isn't predetermined at the beginning of the game. It's actually on the clear cards that you're drafting to make your painting. Some of them will have like a picture of the gray ribbon, and it'll say like you get a ribbon for every like triangle that you have. So you're like, ooh, so now if I can get 3 triangles, I can pull 3 gray ribbons, and they're all worth 2 points. Some other ribbons might be like 1 ribbon is 4 points, 2 ribbons are 10 points, and 3 ribbons are 18 points. But they're going to be obviously tougher, and you can only get 1 of them per turn, one of that particular color ribbon. Whereas I could get 4 gray ribbons in a turn. I can only get 1 red ribbon, or 1 blue ribbon, or 1 green ribbon. So that also plays a part in sort of how you're setting yourself up, and you're like, oh, I have this now, that's perfect over there. Nobody's going for triangles because nobody has this gray ribbon in their hand. So there's a good chance I could wait and get that one with the 2 triangles on it. That could come my way for really cheap because nobody really wants that. So there are ways. There's a lot of different ways to play, and I think that's pretty fun.
I think the other thing that's important to note in this particular game that I would say is a little dissimilar than some of the other games we've played in this category are that the palettes, your little tokens that you use to purchase,
the inspiration tokens.
The inspiration tokens. Thank you. To purchase cards further down the line. There's no incentive to hold on to those in the long run.
Right. They're not worth any points or anything like that. And they are, they're all present in the game, and there's never any more introduced. You start with everyone starts with a certain number, and they're just kind of passed around. So you can kind of collect them in hopes that maybe towards the end on one of your final few turns that you're like, now that I have 7 inspiration tokens, I can really just go to town. I can get anything I want, no matter how expensive it is. But at the same time, by hoarding those, you may well have been giving away opportunities to take cards that probably would have helped you a lot more earlier on, because you're like, I'm not going to go after that card because that would cost me 2 inspiration tokens. Well, but if it gets you 3 ribbons, then maybe maybe that might be worth it. So there's that also adds an element of strategy without being overwhelming. That's the cool part about this game is that there is, it seems like there's a lot going on, but it's not more than I think your average starting board gamer or family type board gamer. It's not too much for people who are still relatively new to the hobby. So I think some games can be in that gateway range, can be like, oh, I have so many different things and so much to this doesn't. There's a lot of strategy here, and if you let it be too brain burny, it can be. But if you just play it for what it is, which is just kind of a simple rule set and have fun, I think this is a great game.
This was, yeah, I had a little bit of analysis paralysis at times, but this was definitely a lot of fun to play and not terribly challenging to learn or hopefully to explain. I have to tell you guys that Bill is solely responsible for explaining the rules whenever we play games in a group. So I do feel for him. I'm going to give you a shout out here because we really appreciate that.
I appreciate you.
Probably me more than some because I do listen to the rules. I know sometimes that's a little challenging in a group setting.
It can be. It can
but it is. But it was a lot of fun. And I think this is a good one to introduce people to open drafting.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a solid choice.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. Real quick, if you want to maybe hear in the future an episode kind of maybe touching on sort of the art of teaching a new game, because I know sometimes that there is kind of one person who really is driving, game night. And, hey, I got this new game, and nobody wants to watch a video or, but so they're just like, all right, show me. So if you're interested in an episode that just sort of breaks down some best practices, let us know, and we'll tell you how to get a hold of us at the end of the show here. So what's your final rating on Canvas?
Final rating on Canvas, I am going to say I think this was a solid 7 for me. Thought it was a lot of fun. Very beautiful art. Really appreciate that in a game. But yeah, I'd say it was a solid 7.
Okay. Well, that's 7 is a recommend for sure. I will also give it a 7. I think it's a really great game. I don't see myself coming back to it a whole lot. It's probably a little simpler than I normally would get to the table a lot. But I really appreciate it for what it is, and I think they did a really, really good job with it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
If you're looking for a board game for beginners,
yes.
This is a solid one.
Yes, and it is beautiful. It really, really is. That's the thing that really impressed me from the get-go, is everything about it is beautiful. So, all right, so the next one we're going to get into is, it's called Century Spice Road. And this one is, you'll find, shares a lot of the same mechanisms. In fact, it shares 4 mechanisms with Canvas. And let me kind of describe it for you, and then we'll come back to some of the similarities. So in Century Spice Road, you have 4 spices, your spice collectors, and they're these colored cubes that are in these bowls.
Yep.
And they do a real good job. It's the bowls, the plastic bowls are a fun touch.
They look pretty. Like ceramic pottery. The spices are in colors that remind you of the spice that they are. Yeah, it's neat. It's very aesthetically pleasing from that aspect.
Absolutely. And so these there's yellow, red, green, and brown cubes, and they all represent a different spice. And so what you're trying to do is ultimately buy these scoring cards that are up at the top of the board, and they cost some amount of these spices. So you might have one that's like 2 brown cubes, a green cube, and 2 red cubes. And that's what it costs. And it might be worth 14 points or something like that. And so there's as low as 7 points, I believe, and as high as 20, maybe 22. But I think 20. And they're up at the top, and they require different amounts of cubes. So you start with, in most cases, you'll just start with a couple of yellow cubes. On larger games, some of the later players will have like a random red cube or something. But what you're doing is you are open drafting cards from a market. Sound familiar? And what these cards do is they will either allow you to upgrade your cubes, like maybe move a yellow to a red, or a red to a green, or something like that. Or it may allow you to change, like, say, 2 red cubes into a green and a brown cube, or something like that. Maybe I think there's one that's like 4 yellow cubes will turn into like 2 reds and a green, or something. So ultimately, it's kind of you're collecting these cards, and you're just like Canvas. The one on the first one in line is free. After that, if you want one later in line, you have to drop off a cube, a spice. Obviously, you'd probably want to do the yellow ones because they're the cheapest, the easiest to get, and the lowest on the totem pole. But you can actually drop off any color on those. So say you want the 3rd card in, you drop a cube on the 1st spot and the 2nd spot, and you take the 3rd card. Everything else would move down. So things, again, get cheaper as things go around. So what you're doing is you're building a hand of cards. And so on your turn, you can either buy a card from the market in that open drafting method, or you can play a card from your hand that allows you to do something like converting cubes to other cubes, or even just generating cubes. There's a card that just gives you a brown cube, which is the most powerful one. Yes,
solid card right there.
Is a solid card. And the brown is cinnamon. I do remember that.
It is the most expensive spice on this in this game.
Absolutely. And the another thing you can do is you can decide on your turn instead to rest, which means you just, for only thing you do on your turn is you pick up the cards back into your hand. And then you can reuse them again on later turns. And then the 4th thing that you can do is you can purchase one of the scoring cards that we talked about earlier, where you turn in cubes, spices that you have, in order to buy these cards. In a 4 or 5 player game, once somebody has collected 5 of them, then the round finishes, and then everybody flips their cards over, and you count the number of victory points they have. If you buy ones from the 1st or 2nd spot, you have a chance to earn bonus points through these coins, and then any leftover spices that you have that aren't yellow will also be additional points. And it's just whoever has the most points wins. So, what did you think?
I really liked Century Spice Road. I thought it was a lot of fun. I do think it had a lot of the same elements as Canvas. We played these at different game nights, so it's not like we played these one after the other. I think that would have been a little bit tedious, potentially.
Yeah, like, I know this.
But I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I even enjoyed it even though I did not win, and in fact handily lost.
Yes, she did.
But it was a lot of fun. I liked the elements of, collecting my free cards. I don't think I paid for a single card in the entire time except for the scoring cards at the end, or, throughout the game. But I struggled because I did not strategize what cards I needed, or which cards had the mechanisms that I needed to advance. In fact, most of my cards would take the cinnamon spice cube, and while technically I'm upgrading in terms of total points, I'm downgrading the cinnamon because it's the highest ranked spice in this game. But I'm, and if it's worth 4 points, I'm going to get, a cardamom, which is a green spice, and probably 2 saffrons, which are the red ones, and 1 turmeric. So in general, I'm earning more points.
Right.
But I'm frustrated because I'm losing that cinnamon. And in my mind, if I had a cinnamon, I was going to win the game.
Right.
That is inaccurate, but that's how I felt.
It is. And that's why it really, really depends on the available scoring cards. Because there are cards that are just like 2 reds and 3 greens and don't even need any browns. And then there are like 20-point cards that are like 5 browns And you're like, that's really hard to get. But, if that's what you're collecting, then, hey, that's what you're doing. So you don't always necessarily need to have or want to have all of the best spices. You want the proper mix in order to buy the right cards that you can get before anybody else does.
And did I learn that in the round we played? Absolutely not. I played my own rules. I made up my own game, basically. It was a challenge. But I also learned the value of resting a turn. I thought that was kind of a illusory move. No, that's super useful. You definitely should do that if you have cards that, you need to kind of recollect each time. For example, you're given 2 cards in the beginning of the game and you have them throughout. Like, you don't discard them at any point, but you have to rest in order to collect them back. And the first one of those is a card that gets you 2 free yellow spices. So turmeric in this game. And those are useful because as you play that card a couple of times over, you might collect 8 or 10 yellow spices throughout. And so that's definitely valuable because you can then, with the other card, upgrade spices. So I think you can upgrade 2 points in the other card, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you can upgrade 2 times. So you could do, it goes yellow, red, green, brown. So you could go 1 yellow into a green, or you could do 2 yellows into 2 reds, or you could do a red into a brown, or 2 greens into 2 browns. So it's basically just gives you 2 different upgrade options. The biggest key to me, for me in this game, is managing to buy cards, specifically cards that work very well off of each other. I had one that maybe is takes 4 yellows and turns it into 3 reds and 2 greens, and then another card that converts 2 greens into a brown, and then another card that might do 3 reds into 3 greens or something like that, where you're constantly just sort of each card builds off each other to try and give you the greatest variety. Which not only helps you upgrade faster, but it also gives you a lot of flexibility in that you don't have to rest nearly as often if you always have a playable card that works well for you. And that's just something that gets picked up over time. I have a funny story about this particular game with, I guess it's not funny, but it's a story, about this particular game in Game Group. We had a Game Group in Denver, and this lady came in and she'd never really played any games outside of Monopoly and Sorry and Trouble, and she just saw it. It was on Meetup.com, and she came, and we're a pretty big group. There were about 20 people. We would get together at breweries and stuff, and she showed up and she was really excited to kind of see what modern board games are about, and we played a game of Century Spice Road. And afterwards, she was just like, can we play that again? And we're like, okay. So we played it again. And she came back the next week and had gone out and bought it. And I swear she came every single week. And I think that's the only game she played every week for like a year. She would teach it to new people who would show up. Like, that was her favorite. Like, she was born for this game, right? It's like finding a soulmate in a board game. It was, it blew me away. I've played this game a lot of times. I probably played this game 100 times. She probably played it more times it just coming to Game Group than I've ever played it. So, it can be a very, very good gateway game.
It's resounding praise from one individual.
Yes, from one individual. Everyone I've introduced this to, it's gone over really well. It's this. I've never really had this game bomb. I think it's a really good one. But real quick, before we go into a final score on this, I kind of wanted to touch on sort of the 4 mechanisms that these share with each other, and kind of touch maybe on a little more. We've talked about open drafting. I think at this point we all kind of are familiar with that concept. Some of the other games we've talked about with open drafting are Splendor, King Domino, was one of the whatnot cabinet
Yep.
is open drafting, as opposed to closed drafting like Draftosaurus or Sushi Go are both closed drafting. But these open drafting because everyone can see, everyone's buying from a common marketplace, that it's visible what's available and what you're taking, and that's what makes it open. And obviously, both of these share that. They also share this mechanism that is weirdly named, but accurately named. It's called the increased value of unchosen resources mechanism, which is exactly what it says. That means that you're dropping off things on unchosen cards to kind of skip them, and it increases the value of them. Like in Canvas, when you're dropping off those inspiration tokens, when somebody takes that, that gives them inspiration tokens. That means that they're more valuable. In Century Spice Road, when you drop off spices on those cards and you take a card, even if you don't necessarily want that card, you might want the 3 spices that are on it because nobody else has really wanted it. So at what point does it become valuable enough on its own to just be like, I'm taking these spices? So that's the increased value of unchosen resources mechanism.
Yeah, that mechanism got me a couple of times.
Aptly named. Yes.
God, it was
And
tough.
then it also shares set collection. So you're collecting ribbons in Canvas in order to get victory points. And then obviously you're collecting sets of resources to buy the point cards in Century Spice Road. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with set collection. Anytime you're actively collecting something in groups in order to either score with them or use them to buy something that you can score with. And the last they share is hand management, because in both of these you're open drafting these cards into your hand, and you're limited in Canvas to 5 cards before you have to play 3 of them. So you have to be very careful about what cards you're putting in your hand. You don't want just like random, oh, well, I guess I'll just take that for no apparent reason. I mean, they should all be in your hand for a reason. And so you're managing your hand of cards in that. And then in Century Spice Road, you're managing your hand of cards in order to play out cards that will benefit you enough to be able to let you buy those scoring cards. If you don't manage that hand correctly and you're just putting random cards in your hand that don't work together, then that's a big part of why I'm guessing you're not going to win this game. Not you, per se, but, universal you. So those are the 4 mechanisms that these share. And so there's a lot of DNA here between these 2 games. But they feel so differently, don't they?
I would agree with that.
I mean, would you have even made a lot of these connections if we hadn't have sat down and actually talked about what kind of things these games do the same?
Absolutely not. Honestly, when you set them side by side, I was shocked at how similar they felt without being really similar in theme.
Yeah.
I would say theme is probably where it differs the most.
Well, and different strategies and tactics. I think that what works in one game like really isn't the way to go in the other. So I think they do very different things with them. I think that's kind of one of the joys of board games is there's only so many mechanisms. And so there's thousands and thousands and thousands of games. 5,000 games a year come out. But there's like 100 or less actual like mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really kind of what these games do with them and how they sort of piece them together and things like that kind of make them unique. But what would you give Century?
I mean, I really liked Century Spice Road. I am going to give it an 8.5.
8.5. Okay. Well, I'm going to give it a 9 because it has been a monstrous go-to for me. Anytime I want to kind of give that next step of, hey, we've played some light games. Here's one that feels like a heavier game, but really isn't. The rule book is 1 sheet. It's not even a book. It's a rule sheet. It's 1 sheet, front and back. And the first side of it is just basically showing you how to set the game up. So it's very rules light. But it feels like a bigger, heavier game and kind of gives you that feeling after you've played it like, wow, I really played I really played a modern board game. So it's really good for that. And I think I've had a lot of success.
Yeah, I don't think this would be an every week play for me, unlike your friend at Board Game Meetup. But however, I would reach for this one again. I think this is a lot of fun, and I think this is great for a group of people. So,
Yep,
and I think,
agreed.
again, plays up to
Plays 2 to 5.
2 to 5.
Yep,
So.
and Canvas plays 1 to 5. It does have a solo mode if any of you, if that sort of sways any of you.
Very neat.
We haven't really talked about many solo games. Maybe we could sometime
It might help.
do an episode on solo games. I've got a bunch. All right, so I think that will do it for us. This is our longest episode ever, so thank you so much for sticking with us on this. We appreciate it. We'd love to hear your feedback. We act on it, obviously. We had some input about talking more about mechanisms, and we tried really hard on this episode to try and include more of that. So we do listen. Please let us know what you think at the Meeple Podcast on Instagram, the Meeple Podcast on Facebook. You can also email us at themaplepodcast@gmail.com. And check out our website at themaplepodcast.com. There is a page, the Board Games List page, where I actually list every episode, the games that we talked about, player count, pictures of the games, what our ratings are, and everything. So if you're interested in one, you can kind of glance there and say, oh, they talked about Century Spice Road in episode 15. So, and then you can go and listen to it if that's what you're looking for.
And we do occasionally update ratings as well. So I know I've been kind of harsh in some of my ratings. So we do update those, and occasionally my tune changes. So be sure to check those out as well.
Absolutely. And I am sure at some point in the next, let's call it the next 15 or 20 episodes, we will have some best of episodes where we can kind of revisit some stuff and say, you know what, we've taken a look at all these different games. What are kind of our top recommendations? So, but that's much further down the line. So we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in.